So Ben, coordinated inauthentic behavior. You've been covering it for quite some time before joining Meta. So what are the most recent trends you observe on Meta's platforms, and what new do you see perhaps around the war in Ukraine?
In terms of the new trends, these tend to evolve quite slowly. So I wouldn't peg this to Ukraine as a conflict, but something we've been seeing over the last couple of years is a few trends emerging in the influence operations space more broadly. One of the big ones is that we've seen an evolution of operations from large, noisy, spammy, if you like, wholesale operations, down towards operations which are much smaller and more detailed, if you like, retail. So you'll see, rather than running a couple of hundred spammy accounts, you'll see an operation try to create 5 or 6, but they're very detailed and they're quite complex in their deception. They'll be making a lot of effort to hide. And so there's an attempt to make less noise, but to penetrate a bit more. But the payoff for that, for the operation, is that if they have fewer assets, then the value of the asset goes up. So if you take down just 6 accounts, you've taken down the whole operation. So there's a cost-benefit analysis that they're having to make there. As part of that, and I think partly in reaction to that, we've also seen operations that are trying to blur the boundaries, if you like, between what's an inauthentic account and what's a real person. So we've seen cases, particularly from some of the Russian and Iranian operations, where the operation has tried to plant an article in a real news outlet. They've tried to somehow convince the news outlet to run this story. Or even in one case we saw in 2020, we had the Russian Internet Research Agency hiring freelance journalists to write for them and then editorializing the content. And I think the idea is there to say, well, it's not an inauthentic persona posting this, it's a real person. But it's just that they've been quite heavily edited. And so it's a way to hide behind real people and try and move the actual influence operation somewhere where it can't be seen so well. And then one other thing we've seen increasingly is platform diversification. You and I have both been with DFR Lab for a long time, and if we'd been having this conversation 5 years ago, we would have been talking about a different set of platforms to what we would be talking about today. So both the landscape of the whole industry has changed, but also what we're seeing is operations going across more and more platforms. And if you remember the fun we have with the Russian operation Secondary Infection, back in 2019, that was an operation which, by the time we'd sort of run out of things to find, it was over about 230 different platforms and forums. And I think for an operator, the thinking there is if we put it on one platform and it gets taken down, we've lost everything. But if we spread across 10 different platforms, we've got more resilience there. But again, the trade-off is they're having to do so much more work to keep things going on all those different platforms. But ultimately, the defenses evolve, the attackers try and evolve, and so what you see now is this evolutionary race to see who can get ahead of whom.
On that note, Nathaniel Gleischer, the head of Meta's security policy, yesterday pointed out an idea about defense advantage. So you make it harder for adversary or malign actor on a platform to install the operation, and this actor is losing all the energy on fighting the defense mechanisms that are put in place. So in your opinion, what are the most effective defense mechanisms on Meta's platforms that make it harder for adversary to do the operation?
I think honestly with that, the way I would think about it is not about a single mechanism, it's more about an approach. You can think of an operation as a chain of steps that they have to go through. At the very basic level, they have to get online, and then they have to get an account, and then they actually have to disguise the account, and then they start doing things with it. And so as you think of any operation, if you can break it down into this kill chain, then you can start thinking not just how do we disrupt it in one place, but how do we make every step of the chain, every link in the chain harder for that operation to do? And so when you're thinking about how to approach influence operations or any kind of online operation, for me, the most valuable thing you can do is think through the different steps that threat actor is taking, and you don't content yourself with just hitting it in one place, but you work out, actually we can disrupt it there and there and there. So for example, there's a publicly known operation called Ghostwriter, which is involved both in compromising email accounts and in compromising social media accounts. If you have a situation where both the email platform and the social media platform are making it harder for that operation to go, then you've got increased costs in multiple places. And rather than thinking about what's the one place where we can make it most expensive, for me, the thinking is, what are the many places where we can make it more expensive right across the board? Because that way, wherever the operation goes, it's going to be struggling. And so it's thinking through that chain of steps that they take.
There must be some project or process that gets you excited in terms that it will improve the current situation with inauthentic behavior on social media platforms in general. Can you name one? Can you tell what you see, how things are maybe gradually getting better?
Honestly, one of the things which has got me most hopeful and excited is seeing the number of digital Sherlocks we now have. And again, I'm thinking back to the very first 360 OS we did back in 2017, and there were a few dozen of us in the room. And you look at where we are now, there are so many people who are interested in this, and there are so many people who are interested in learning the skills, and they're bringing their own perspectives and they're bringing their own mindset. You've got people from different countries, you've got people from different cultures, different linguistic skills. You've got people who have the awareness to be able to say, hang on, that thing that I'm seeing on this platform, whatever it might be, that just doesn't add up. And then they have the skills to be able to look at it and say, well, why doesn't it add up? How do I prove that it doesn't add up? And where do they take it? And if you think about the big arc of what's happened in this field since we started the DFR lab back in 2015, 2016, the field has just got much bigger. And there are far more eyes on the problem, and there are far more brains thinking about the problem. And so sure, that means that there's a much bigger conversation going on. But it means that back in the days of like 2014, 15, when I was starting out on this, there were so few of us doing it. And there was that feeling of being a bit of a lone voice, and particularly before the 2016 election in the US, getting people to pay attention to this as a thing and getting them to understand influence operations exist and they are potentially problematic was really hard. And so to be in a place now where we have so many people who understand that basic influence operations are a thing, how can we get better at detecting them? How can we teach each other? The amount of learning that's going on, and the people who've learned new tricks and come up with new tricks is something that, it would have been in our dreams back in 2017. So the best thing really is the way we have so many more people thinking about this in terms of how do we get better at detection? How do we get better at attribution? How do we get better at identifying what's a good, strong signal? That's the fundamental change which gives me hope for this.
Yeah, indeed. Digital Sherlocks are having their own event on the sidelines of 360 US. But if you think about the event as a whole, what are the key takeaways you have so far from 360 2022?
Really, for me, a lot of it is around how far we've come since the first one 5 years ago, and the level of interest and the way you've got in one place all the different players on the field coming together and talking. And sure, not everybody agrees about everything, because if they did, there would be no point having the conversation, right? But it's a place where you have so many different voices coming together, and we all care about the same thing, and we care about solving the problem. And if you look back to the very first 360 back in 2017, the hope was that we would be able to start laying the foundations for a community. And if you look at 360 OS in 2022, you can see that community coming together. And to see the birth of a whole new discipline and the birth of a whole new field of study is a privilege that very few people ever get. It really is the creation of a new field, and we're here to see it. That is amazing, and part of what 360 has become is really it's the place where this is happening.
Thank you, Ben, very much.
Thank you.